Is vulnerability important? Because there's a lot of performative vulnerability taking place in the internet.
Sure.
Is it an important thing for my health, happiness, my future to be a vulnerable person?
Well, let's define it. Vulnerability is the emotion we experience when we are up against uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So vulnerability is what I feel. It's the cringe, the awkward, the emotion I feel in times of uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure. So it was really interesting because I had a hard time helping people understand because we are so raised to believe that vulnerability is weakness that it took a trip to Fort Bragg working with special forces to ask soldiers a question. Give me a single example of courage in your life. One example that you've witnessed or you yourself have done. One example of courage that did not require uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure. No one could answer it. Finally, a young soldier stood up and said 3 tours. There is no courage without vulnerability. So is vulnerability important? It is if we want to be brave with our lives. If we want to be able to manage ourselves in a way that's values aligned and courageous, we have to be able to reconcile how we feel when we're uncertain, at risk, or exposed. I mean, and really weirdly, the next week after the trip to Fort Bragg, I was with the Seattle Seahawks, the football team, NFL team.
Yeah.
Asked the players, give me an example of courage on the field or off that did not require vulnerability. They said that it's not possible. There is no courage. Like if you're doing things in your life, in your work, and there's no risk, no uncertainty, and no exposure, then they're not brave. If you know how it's going to end, that is not courage. Courage is the willingness to show up and be all in when you cannot predict the outcome. Courage is saying, I love you first. That's, you want to know what vulnerability is? I love you first. Have you ever said, I love you first?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
But it's hard. It's,
So I need to give context. It's been a while since I've been in that situation.
Well, you've had to go first.
Yeah, we've had to go first, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's this great story that I tell about, I gave a talk here. It was actually in LA. And afterwards, a kid came up to me. He's probably 22 or 23. And he said, can I tell you a story about your work and how it's really changed my life? And I was like, sure. And a kind of a crowd grew around. And this is like the last time I ever got penned, like not being able to exit a stage because it was such a traumatic, it wasn't traumatic, but it was like, he said, well, I was dating this woman and I was so crazy about her. So I took her to eat to our favorite restaurant and I waited until the dessert came because we love this chocolate volcano. And I ordered it and I said, I love you. And she looked at me and she said, I think you're awesome. And I think we should date other people. And then she Ubered home. And so I was like, God damn, this is the worst story I've ever heard. This is not a good story. And he said, so I got in my car and I drove home. And the whole way home, I just kept saying to myself over and over, fuck Brené Brown. Fuck Brené Brown. It's like, when's the turn on the story, And he said, I got home and I walked into my apartment and I pushed the door open and both my roommates were wired in. They were on their computers and they looked up and said, dude, what's going on? And he said, I told her I loved her and she told me I was awesome. And one of my roommates looked at me and said, what the fuck were you thinking? That's not how it works. When you are going toward them, they go away. So you're always kind of going away. So they come towards you. And he goes, oh, no. I don't want to be that dude. I was daring greatly. And he said both of his roommates just got teary-eyed and went, right on, man, right on. Like, there is no courage without vulnerability. How can you say you're brave if you're not putting yourself out there?